Welcome to Sleepy Holidays, a channel where cultural traditions transform into gentle, soothing narratives. Each episode invites you to slow down, breathe deeply, and drift into peaceful historical stories that calm the mind and comfort the weary soul. Tonight we journey back through time to discover how strangers became neighbors, and shared meals became cherished traditions. If these restful stories bring you peace, remember to like and subscribe to help us continue creating these calming bedtime tales together. Tonight we explore the gentle origins of Thanksgiving, travelling back to an autumn long ago when courage met kindness across cultural divides. We will witness the quiet strength of those who crossed an ocean for hope, feel the salt spray on weathered faces, and discover how a simple harvest meal became the foundation of a tradition that still warms our hearts today. Close your eyes now, and let these whispered stories carry you to peaceful dreams. Chapter 1. Arrivals in a New Land. Picture the grey English coastline growing smaller behind a wooden ship. Families gathered on crowded decks, clutching worn Bibles and precious few belongings. The Mayflower creaked against autumn winds as 102 souls embarked on a journey toward an uncertain tomorrow. Women held sleeping children closer. Men gazed toward the endless horizon, all bound together by faith and the fragile hope of freedom in an unknown world. The ocean stretched endlessly before them, waves rising and falling like breathing mountains of salt water. Days blended into weeks as the ship rolled through September storms. Below deck, families huddled in cramped quarters, sharing meager rations and whispered prayers. The smell of brine mixed with unwashed bodies and sickness. Yet still they pressed forward, carried by something stronger than fear. A quiet determination to build something stronger than fear. Children who had never known anything but English meadows now learned the rhythm of ocean waves. Their mothers sang soft lullabies to mask the creaking timber and endless rocking. Fathers carved small toys from precious scraps of wood, creating moments of joy amid the hardship. Each sunset painted the water gold and crimson, reminding them that beauty could still exist even in the midst of uncertainty, even when everything familiar had been left behind. October brought colder winds and rougher seas. The ship groaned under the weight of storm after storm. Some passengers grew weak from illness, their faces pale in the dim lantern light. Yet the community aboard the Mayflower grew stronger. Neighbours became family, strangers shared their last pieces of bread. In the darkest hours, they discovered that hope could multiply when divided, that courage could grow when shared among those who understood the price of freedom. The taste of salt became constant, coating their lips, seasoning their simple meals of hardtack and preserved meat. Water rations grew precious, each drop carefully measured and shared. Women mended torn clothes by candlelight. Men repaired damaged rigging with numbed fingers. The ship had become their entire world. A floating village where every person mattered. Every skill was valued. Every skill was valued. Every prayer was heard by neighbours who had become closer than blood. November winds grew fierce and cold. Ice formed on the rigging each morning, yet still they sailed toward their promised land. Elder Brewster led evening prayers in the ship's dim hold, voices joining together in ancient psalms that seemed to calm even the wildest storms. These were not conquerors seeking gold, but families seeking peace, farmers hoping for fertile soil, believers dreaming of worship without fertile soil, believers dreaming of worship without fear, simple people with extraordinary courage. The women gathered in small circles, sharing stories of the homes they had left behind, rose gardens and stone cottages, market days and Sunday services in familiar churches. Their voices carried both grief and anticipation, mourning what was lost while nurturing hope for what might bloom in new soil. They spoke of the gardens they would plant, the meals they would cook, the children they would raise in freedom, dreams that sustained them through the endless grey days. Each dawn brought the same question to weathered faces pressed against small windows. Is today the day we see land? Young John Howland climbed the rigging daily, squinting toward the western horizon, searching for any sign that their journey might soon end. The ocean had become both friend and enemy, carrying them toward their dreams while testing their resolve with every rolling wave. "66 days now, surely land could not be much farther. 66 days now, surely land could not be much farther." The ship's stores grew dangerously low. Barrels of water nearly empty. Salt pork reduced to small daily portions. Yet Captain Jones pushed forward through November's grey waters. He too had begun to worry, not just about provisions, but about the approaching winter. These passengers were not seasoned sailors. They would need time to build shelter before the harsh New England cold arrived. Time was becoming as precious as food. Children born on English soil now took their first steps on a wooden deck. Their small hands gripped rope railings as they learned to walk on the swaying ship. These little ones would grow up knowing two worlds: the stories their parents told of green English hills, and the reality of this new land that awaited them. They were becoming something unprecedented, citizens of both memory and possibility. Citizens of both memory and possibility. Bridges between what was and what could be. The smell of wood smoke from the ship's galley mixed with the endless salt air. Simple meals became precious rituals. Grace was offered with deeper gratitude than ever before. Each shared portion was a gift, each preserved apple a treasure. Families who had lived separate lives in England now knew each other's hopes, fears, dreams. The journey was transforming them into something new. A community bound by shared hardship and common purpose. On the morning of November 9th, a cry rang out from the ship's crow's nest. Land, land ahead. Passengers rushed to the deck, straining their eyes toward the western horizon. There, like a dark line drawn between grey sea and grey sky, lay the coast of what would become Massachusetts. After 66 days of endless water, they had reached the edge of their new world, tears mixed with salt spray on grateful faces. The sight of land brought both relief and new anxiety. This was not the Virginia colony they had planned to reach, but somewhere far north, colder, less prepared for their arrival. Yet as they gazed toward those distant shores, something stirred within them deeper than fear. The journey across the ocean had tested them, changed them, prepared them. They were no longer the same people who had left England. They were no longer the same people who had left England. Chapter 2. First Winter. The ocean had delivered them to a new world, but winter arrived like an uninvited guest. November winds stripped the last golden leaves from unfamiliar trees, and the pilgrims faced their first test in this strange land. The wooden houses they had hurriedly built offered little comfort against the approaching cold, their thin walls barely holding back the bitter New England air that would soon define their survival. December brought a chill that bit through every layer of their shabby clothing, worn thin from months at sea. The wool that had once kept them warm in England now felt inadequate, threadbare and patched. Families huddled together in cramped quarters, their breath visible in the frigid air inside their modest shelters. Each morning brought frost that painted their windows and reminded them how far they were from home. Inside the common house, the pungent smell of unwashed bodies lingered in the stale air. Too many people crammed into too small a space, with little privacy and even less comfort. The scent of sickness began to mingle with smoke from their meagre fires, creating an atmosphere thick with worry. Yet in these close quarters, they learned to lean on one another, finding strength in shared hardship and whispered prayers. Outside, the sharp crunch of frozen ground greeted every footstep. The earth had turned hard as stone, making even simple tasks feel monumental. Gathering firewood became an ordeal, each piece precious as gold. Water barrels froze solid, requiring careful thawing over precious flames. The very landscape seemed to challenge their resolve, testing whether these strangers could truly call this place home. Food supplies dwindled as January winds howled through the settlement. The stores they had carefully rationed began to run dangerously low, each meal smaller than the last. Hard biscuits and salted meat became luxuries, while thin broths stretched what little remained. Hunger became a constant companion, gnawing at their stomachs and testing their faith. Yet they continued to give thanks, finding grace even in scarcity. The first fever appeared in late January, spreading quietly through their crowded quarters. One by one, friends and family began to weaken, their faces growing pale in the dim firelight. The sound of coughing echoed through the nights, a reminder of how fragile their new beginning truly was. Mothers tended to children with trembling hands, while fathers worked despite their own failing strength. By February, nearly half their number had fallen to the brutal winter. Graves multiplied in the frozen ground, each one marking a dream cut short. Families that had crossed an ocean together now faced empty spaces around their fires. The living grew fewer, but their determination somehow grew stronger. They buried their dead quietly, not wanting to show their vulnerability to any watching eyes. Those who remained developed a quiet resilience, born from necessity and nurtured by hope. Women mended clothes with numb fingers, stretching every thread to its limit. Men ventured out in search of game, their footsteps lonely in the snow. Children learned to play quietly, understanding without words that laughter must be gentle in this season of sorrow. The emotional weight of loss pressed down like the winter cold itself, seeping into every corner of their lives. Letters home spoke of hardship in careful words, not wanting to discourage others who might follow. They held on to memories of England, while slowly accepting that this harsh place would shape them into something new, something stronger than they had ever imagined possible. March brought the first hints of change, as daylight lingered a little longer each evening. The worst of winter began to loosen its grip, though cold mornings still reminded them of their fragility. Ice started to crack along the shoreline, creating music that spoke of renewal. Hope began to stir, fragile as spring buds, but growing stronger with each passing day. It was during one of these lengthening days that they first saw him. A figure emerging from the forest edge. Tall and confident, moving with the easy grace of someone who belonged to this land. Their hearts raced with uncertainty. Was this friend or threat approaching their vulnerable settlement? Hands instinctively reached for tools that might serve as weapons, while eyes strained to read intentions in unfamiliar features. But the stranger raised his hand in greeting, not aggression. His voice carried across the clearing, speaking words they recognized. English words, impossible yet unmistakable in the March air. Somerset had learned their language from fishermen, and now offered it as a bridge between two worlds. The pilgrims stood frozen, not from cold, but from the stunning realization that they were not alone in this wilderness. Tentative conversations began, each word carefully chosen and gently offered. Somerset spoke of his people, of the land they now shared, of seasons and survival. The pilgrims listened with growing wonder, understanding that this meeting might change everything. Fear slowly gave way to curiosity, as two groups of strangers began the delicate work of becoming neighbours rather than adversaries. Through Samoset, they learned of Massasoit, the great sachem who watched over this region. Stories of wisdom and leadership crossed the cultural divide, painting pictures of a leader who might understand their need for peace. The possibility of friendship began to take root, fragile as early spring flowers, but carrying the promise of something beautiful growing from the harsh soil of their first winter. As winter finally released its grip, the pilgrims discovered they had survived more than cold and hunger. They had endured the hardest lesson of all, learning to find hope in the darkest hours. The friendships forming with their native neighbours offered warmth that no fire could provide, promising that their second spring in this new world would bloom with possibilities they had never dared to imagine. Chapter 3. Budding Alliances. As winter's grip loosened upon Plymouth, something remarkable began to unfold. The careful distance between two peoples started to narrow, like morning mist dissolving in gentle sunlight. Curious eyes watched from forest edges. Tentative steps were taken across invisible boundaries. What had once been fear was slowly transforming into something far more precious, the delicate seeds of understanding. It began with simple gestures, a hand raised in greeting rather than warning. The Wampanoag people had observed these newcomers through countless seasons, noting their struggles and their persistence. Their leader, Massasoit, possessed wisdom earned through generations of diplomacy. He recognized that these strangers, despite their differences, shared the same fundamental needs: shelter, sustenance, and the hope for peaceful tomorrows. The first formal encounter came on a crisp March morning. Samoset, a Sagamore from the north, walked boldly into Plymouth settlement. His greeting of welcome Englishmen, in their own language, sent ripples of astonishment through the community. Here was a bridge between worlds, a voice that could speak across the vast divide of culture and custom, opening pathways previously unimaginable. Soon after, Squanto arrived, a man whose life story bridged continents. Having travelled to Europe and returned home, he possessed unique understanding of both civilizations. His presence brought comfort to the nervous settlers and credibility to the cautious Wampanoag. In his weathered hands lay the power to translate not just words, but entire ways of seeing the world, building trust syllable by syllable. The pivotal moment arrived when Massasoit himself approached Plymouth. Accompanied by 60 warriors, their faces painted in traditional patterns, they created a magnificent procession. The settlers watched with mixture of awe and apprehension as this powerful Sachem made his intentions known. This was not conquest approaching, but diplomacy in its most ancient and honoured form, where respect commanded more territory than force ever could. Governor Carver and Massasoit met in ceremony that would echo through centuries. With Squanto translating every nuance, they began crafting something unprecedented, a peace treaty between peoples who had never known each other's languages, customs, or dreams. Each word was weighed carefully, like precious stones being set into lasting jewellery. The very air seemed to hold its breath, sensing history unfolding. The treaty they forged was simple yet profound. 6 articles that promised mutual defence, return of stolen property, and punishment for wrongdoing. Most importantly, it established that neither group would harm the other without just cause. These weren't merely words on parchment. They were bridges built across an ocean of misunderstanding, creating safe passage for friendship to grow in previously hostile territory. With agreements sealed, something magical began to bloom. The Wampanoag shared knowledge that had sustained their people for generations: which plants healed, which soils nurtured, which seasons promised abundance. The settlers offered their own wisdom: metal tools that could ease labour, techniques for preserving food, skills learned from distant lands. Knowledge flowed both ways like gentle streams converging into mighty rivers. Daily interactions revealed the beautiful complexity of Wampanoag culture. Their language painted the world in colours English had no words for, describing relationships to land and season that ran deeper than ownership. Children from both communities watched each other with curious eyes, slowly learning that differences in dress and custom couldn't disguise the universal language of laughter, wonder, and play shared by young hearts everywhere. The settlers marvelled at Wampanoag craftsmanship: canoes that moved like whispers across water, homes that breathed with the seasons, tools that worked in harmony with nature rather than against it. Meanwhile, the Wampanoag examined European innovations with equal fascination: metal that held sharp edges longer than stone, fabrics woven with impossible intricacy, instruments that captured time in mysterious ways. Spring transformed into summer under this new alliance. Corn grew taller with Wampanoag guidance, while European seeds took root in American soil with unprecedented success. Squanto's teaching proved invaluable, showing settlers how fish could fertilize crops, how companion planting increased yields, how reading natural signs predicted weather patterns. Each lesson was a gift that multiplied through generations to come. Trade relationships flourished as trust deepened. Beaver pelts, highly prized in European markets, were exchanged for metal goods that revolutionized daily Wampanoag life. But more valuable than any commodity was the growing understanding between peoples. Stereotypes crumbled like autumn leaves, replaced by recognition of shared humanity. Fear transformed into curiosity, suspicion into respect, isolation into community. Summer hunting parties sometimes included members from both communities. English muskets proved effective for bringing down large game, while Wampanoag tracking skills led hunters to quarry that might otherwise remain hidden. These expeditions became more than mere survival activities. They were laboratories of cooperation, proving that different methods could complement rather than compete with each other beautifully. As harvest season approached, both communities looked ahead with unprecedented optimism. The corn grew healthy and strong, squash vines spread like green tapestries, and beans climbed toward heaven on sturdy stalks. This abundance wasn't just agricultural success, it was living proof that cooperation could create prosperity, impossible for either group to achieve alone. Seeds of celebration were already taking root. The alliance that began with tentative gestures had blossomed into genuine partnership. Two peoples who had once viewed each other as strangers now saw neighbours. Communities who had known only separation now discovered the strength found in unity. As autumn's gentle hand began painting leaves with golden promises, both groups sensed that something special was approaching, a celebration worthy of their newfound friendship. Chapter 4: Cultivating Sustenance. Spring arrived like a gentle whisper, carrying promises of renewal across the settlement. The harsh winter had tested their resolve, but now hope stirred in the warming earth beneath their feet. Indigenous neighbours had watched their struggle with knowing eyes, understanding the delicate balance between survival and growth. Seeds of friendship, planted in desperate times, were ready to bloom into something more precious than gold. The Wampanoag women approached with baskets woven from sweet grass, their movements graceful as morning mist. They carried knowledge older than memory, secrets of the soil that European hands had never learned. Squanto stepped forward, his voice gentle as spring rain, offering wisdom that would mean the difference between life and death. His words painted pictures of three sisters dancing together, corn and beans and squash in ancient harmony. Cleared land stretched before them, like a blank canvas waiting for nature's art. The settlers watched with wonder as indigenous hands demonstrated the sacred rhythm of planting. Small mounds of earth rose like tiny hills across the field, each one carefully shaped to catch the morning dew. The soil felt rich and dark between their fingers, pregnant with possibility, promising abundance to those patient enough to wait for its gifts. Corn kernels nestled into the earth like sleeping children tucked into warm beds. Around each precious seed, beans would climb and nitrogen would flow, feeding the hungry soil with nature's own design. Squash seeds found their place in the sacred circle, their broad leaves destined to shade the ground and hold moisture close. The three sisters embraced each other in symbiotic dance, teaching lessons the newcomers were just beginning to understand. Days melted into weeks as tender shoots pushed through the warming soil like green fingers reaching for the sun. Morning dew kissed the young leaves while settlers watched with anxious hearts, learning the patience that farming demands. Indigenous teachers moved through the rows with quiet confidence, their hands gentle as they tended each plant. The rhythm of growth became a meditation, slow and steady as the turning seasons. Sweat glistened on foreheads as the community worked together under the climbing sun. European backs bent alongside native wisdom, creating furrows that would feed both peoples through the coming months. The scent of turned earth rose like incense, rich and loamy, promising abundance to those who honoured its ancient ways. Calloused hands learned new rhythms, old prejudices softening like clay under the patient pressure of shared purpose and common need. Weeds crept between the rows like unwelcome guests at a sacred feast, threatening to choke the precious crops before they could fulfill their promise. The community gathered with hoes and determination, working side by side to protect their investment in the future. Each weed pulled was a small victory, each cleared row a step closer to survival. The sun climbed higher as they worked, their shared labour creating bonds stronger than blood. Rain came like a blessing in the heat of summer, drumming gentle rhythms on broad squash leaves and washing the dust from corn silk that danced in the breeze. The settlers stood watching from doorways, learning to read the sky like their indigenous neighbours had done for countless generations. Each drop was precious, each shower a gift that meant the difference between feast and famine, when autumn painted the world gold. Waiting became an art form, as summer stretched long and golden across the growing fields. The corn stood tall as church spires, its silk catching light like spun silver in the evening sun. Beans climbed their natural trellises while squash vines spread like green carpets across the earth. Patience tested every heart, but the Indigenous teachers smiled knowingly, understanding that the best things in life require time to ripen into sweetness. August brought the first hints of harvest, as corn ears swelled heavy on their stalks and beans hung like emerald jewels from climbing vines. The settlers felt their hearts quicken with anticipation, months of careful tending about to bear fruit. Indigenous hands tested the readiness of each crop, with wisdom passed down through generations, teaching newcomers to read the subtle signs that nature wrote across her bounty. The first harvest came like sunrise after the longest night, golden corn ears heavy with promise, and beans that rattled like musical instruments in their dried pods. Squash had grown round and orange as small suns, their shells hard enough to store through winter's darkest months. Settlers worked alongside their teachers with tears of gratitude streaming down sun-weathered faces, understanding finally that they would survive another year. Baskets overflowed with nature's abundance as the community gathered the fruits of their patient labour. Corn kernels gleamed like amber treasures, each one a small miracle that had grown from faith and careful tending. The sweet scent of success filled the air as hands sorted and stored the precious harvest. What had begun as desperate survival had blossomed into hope, proof that cooperation could overcome even the harshest circumstances. Storage preparations began with the reverence of a sacred ritual, each grain of corn treated like the precious resource it was. Indigenous women demonstrated the ancient arts of preservation, their hands moving with practiced grace as they prepared food to last through winter's lean months. The settlers watched with humble hearts, understanding that their survival depended on wisdom. They were only beginning to comprehend and appreciate. Gratitude filled every heart as the final harvest was gathered, the culmination of months of hope and hard work finally bearing fruit. The fields that had been planted with desperation now yielded abundance beyond their wildest dreams. Corn, beans, and squash had provided not just sustenance, but proof that different peoples could work together to create something beautiful. The three sisters had taught lessons that went far beyond farming. As autumn painted the world in shades of gold and crimson, the successful harvest stood as testament to the power of cooperation and patience. Seeds planted in hope had grown into abundance, creating bonds between peoples that would outlast the changing seasons. The settlement had learned to cultivate more than crops. They had grown understanding, friendship, and the foundation for a celebration that would echo through centuries yet to come. Chapter 5. A Time for Gratitude. The morning sun cast golden ribbons through cottage windows, illuminating hands already busy with preparation. In every dwelling, the air stirred with purpose. Women gathered herbs from frost-touched gardens, while men hauled wooden tables into position. Children scurried between adults, their laughter mixing with the gentle clatter of wooden bowls. The great feast was hours away, yet already the settlement hummed with quiet anticipation, each heart carrying the weight of gratitude to be spoken. Mary Bradford stirred the great iron pot, steam rising like morning mist. Pumpkin and sage mingled in the warm air, while cinnamon bark crackled in the flames below. Her weathered hands moved with practiced rhythm, adding pinches of precious spice brought across the ocean. The rich aroma filled every corner of the cottage, a scent that spoke of home, of harvest, of hope fulfilled. Through the window she could see other kitchens alive with similar industry, each woman preparing her family's contribution. Outside, the men arranged long wooden planks across sturdy barrels, creating tables that would soon groan under the weight of abundance. Their breath formed small clouds in the crisp autumn air as they worked in comfortable silence. John Alden smoothed each plank with careful hands, while Miles Standish tested the stability of each makeshift leg. The tables stretched nearly the length of the common area, a testament to how many would gather, how many hearts would join in thanksgiving. From the edge of the forest, Massasoit and his people approached carrying gifts of their own. Wild turkey hung from strong shoulders, while baskets overflowed with corn still warm from the grinding stones. Children ran alongside the adults, their faces bright with curiosity about this shared celebration. The two communities, once strangers, now moved together like streams converging into one river. Each step brought them closer to a table that would hold both cultures, both gratitudes, both hopes for the future. Young Priscilla Mullins arranged autumn leaves along the table's length, their reds and golds creating a tapestry of colour against the rough wood. She placed small gourds between the leaves, each one a tiny sculpture carved by nature's hand. The decorations were simple, yet they transformed the utilitarian planks into something sacred. Other women joined her work, adding sprigs of pine, clusters of late berries, small tokens that spoke of beauty found even in the wilderness, of grace discovered in unexpected places. The scent of roasting fowl drifted across the settlement, like an invisible banner announcing the feast to come. In fire pits dug deep into the earth, whole birds turned slowly on wooden spits, their skin crackling golden brown. Fat dripped into the flames below, sending up small flares of light and aromatic smoke. Men took turns at the spits, their faces flushed from heat and anticipation. Each bird represented hours of patient hunting, careful preparation, and now, this moment of communal sharing. Inside the common house, women worked side by side, their different languages creating a gentle music of cooperation. Native hands showed English hands how to prepare corn in ways unknown across the ocean. English hands shared techniques for preserving vegetables through harsh winters ahead. Laughter bridged the gaps where words failed, and smiles spoke fluider than any shared tongue. Steam from cooking pots created a warm haze, wrapping the workers in a cocoon of industry, of purpose, of unexpected friendship. Children darted between the preparation areas like swift sparrows, their energy infectious. Some carried small bowls of berries, others hauled bundles of dried corn husks for the fires. English children stared wide-eyed at their native companions, marvelling at beaded clothing and painted faces. Native children giggled at the strange heavy fabrics and wooden shoes of their new friends. Language barriers crumbled under the universal power of play, creating bonds that would outlast the feast, outlast the season, perhaps outlast the season, perhaps outlast the years ahead. As the sun reached its peak, the final preparations gained urgency without losing their joy. Wooden trenchers were placed at intervals along the tables, each one polished to a warm glow. Clay jugs filled with fresh spring water stood ready beside leather cups brought from England. The simplicity of the setting belied the complexity of emotions stirring in every heart: gratitude for survival, wonder at unexpected friendship, hope for the future, and perhaps most precious of all, the recognition that abundance comes in many forms. Elder Brewster emerged from his cottage carrying the worn leather Bible that had accompanied them across the stormy Atlantic. Its pages bore the salt stains of ocean spray, the finger marks of countless prayers uttered in darkness. Today it would bless a feast beyond the imagination of those who first penned its words. The old man's steps were slow but steady, his face serene with the knowledge that this moment, this gathering, this gratitude, was exactly what Providence had intended. The last dishes found their places on the groaning tables, a patchwork of cultures translated into food. English puddings sat beside native succotash, roasted turkey shared space with unfamiliar roots and berries. Each dish told a story of survival, of learning, of hands working together despite the barriers of language and custom. The abundance seemed almost miraculous after the harsh months of scarcity, after the long nights when empty bellies made sleep elusive, after the fear that spring might never come. As if summoned by some invisible bell, people began emerging from cottages and forest paths. Families gathered, straightening worn clothing and smoothing children's hair. The two communities converged on the common area, like tributaries flowing toward the sea. Faces bore the marks of hardship survived, lines carved by wind and worry. Yet something else shone in every eye. Perhaps it was relief, perhaps hope, perhaps simply the deep human joy of sharing abundance after knowing want. The moment of gathering arrived with quiet ceremony. No fanfare announced it, no formal invitation was spoken, yet everyone seemed to know instinctively when the time had come. Families found their places along the lengthy tables, English and native, sitting side by side in an arrangement that seemed both planned and wonderfully spontaneous. Children pressed close to parents, their eyes wide at the feast spread before them. Adults exchanged glances across cultural divides, recognizing something universal in the gratitude reflected in every face. Elder Brewster rose slowly, his weathered hands gripping the edge of the wooden table. The gentle murmur of conversation gradually stilled. Children stopped their fidgeting. Even the autumn breeze seemed to pause in respectful silence. Two communities, brought together by circumstances none could have imagined, bowed their heads as one. In the hush that followed, hearts spoke languages older than English or Algonquian, the universal tongue of gratitude, the ancient prayer of those who have known hunger and now face abundance. The prayer that rose from that gathering transcended words, carrying the weight of survival against impossible odds, the wonder of friendship forged across vast cultural distances, the simple miracle of having enough. When the last whispered Amen faded into the crisp afternoon air, faces lifted toward each other with smiles that needed no translation. The feast was about to begin, but the true nourishment had already taken place. Hearts full of gratitude, hands reaching across differences, voices joined in thanksgiving for the gift of another day, another chance. Chapter 6. Exchange of Cultures. As autumn light filtered through the settlement, two worlds began to blend in ways no one could have imagined. The Wampanoag brought more than game and corn to this gathering. They carried generations of wisdom about harmony with the land. Their voices mixed with English prayers, creating a symphony of gratitude that transcended words, a melody of understanding that would echo through centuries. Massasoit's people shared their knowledge of preparing wild fowl, teaching the colonists which herbs would bring out the sweetest flavors. Gentle hands showed how to wrap corn in husks, how to steam fish with aromatic leaves, how to honor each ingredient as a gift from Creator. The settlers watched with wonder, their rigid European methods softening, learning that survival could taste of both sustenance and celebration. Around the shared fires, Wampanoag women demonstrated the art of grinding corn into meal. Their movements fluid and practiced, a dance passed down through generations. English wives observed closely, their own rough attempts met with patient smiles and gentle corrections. Language barriers dissolved in the universal rhythm of preparation, hands working together, creating something neither culture could have made alone. The feast tables bore witness to this cultural convergence. English pewter plates beside woven grass mats, European-style breads sharing space with traditional corn cakes. Steam rose from clay vessels and iron pots alike, carrying the mingled aromas of two cooking traditions, two ways of honouring the earth's bounty, now blending into something entirely new, something born of necessity and nurtured by respect. As people took their places, Wampanoag and English families found themselves naturally intermingling. Children sat wide-eyed beside elders whose skin bore different colours, but whose eyes held the same warmth. The seating arrangement spoke of trust, of walls carefully lowered, of hearts opened despite fear and uncertainty. Here, in this moment, prejudice gave way to simple human connection. Stories began to flow like gentle streams converging into a river. Though words were often misunderstood, gestures and expressions carried meaning across the divide. Wampanoag elders spoke of seasons and harvests, their hands painting pictures in the air. English settlers shared tales of distant lands, of storms survived and hopes carried across vast oceans. Understanding bloomed in the spaces between languages. A child's laughter broke through the careful politeness, pure and unguarded, echoing across both sides of the gathering. Soon other children joined in, their games needing no translation, their joy infectious and healing. Adults found their own smiles softening, their shoulders relaxing, as innocence reminded them that connection was simpler than they had dared to believe, more natural than fear had taught them. The exchange went deeper than food and stories. Wampanoag practices of gratitude permeated the gathering, their prayers honouring every element of creation, from the smallest seeds to the vast sky above. English Puritans, accustomed to more formal worship, found beauty in this intimate connection to the divine. Two spiritual traditions, different yet recognizing the same sacred thread running through existence. Songs arose spontaneously, first from one side, then answered from the other. Melodies might differ, but rhythm found common ground. Hands began to clap together, creating beats that belonged to neither culture alone, but to this new moment they were creating together. Music became the bridge where words could not reach, harmony rising above difference, unity discovered in shared sound. Unity discovered in shared sound. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across faces both familiar and foreign, but the strangeness was fading, replaced by recognition of common humanity. Mothers from both cultures watched their children with the same protective love. Fathers shared the same pride in successful harvests. Elders carried the same wisdom in their weathered hands, the same stories of struggle and survival. Subtle teachings passed between the groups like autumn breezes carrying seeds. Wampanoag knowledge of sustainable farming, of reading weather patterns, of living in balance with natural cycles, planted themselves in English minds. Meanwhile, European techniques for preserving food, for building lasting structures, found fertile ground in Indigenous understanding. Knowledge flowed both ways, enriching all. As evening approached, the gathering took on an almost sacred quality. The initial apprehension had transformed into something approaching reverence. People moved more slowly, spoke more softly, as if aware they were creating something precious and fragile. This was more than a meal. It was a ceremony of connection, a ritual of peace born from necessity, but blessed with genuine affection. The silence between conversations became comfortable, no longer filled with tension but with contentment. People sat closer together, the invisible barriers that had separated them dissolving in the warmth of shared experience. Hands that had once reached for weapons now passed food with gentle care. Eyes that had watched with suspicion now met with understanding, with the beginning of trust. This convergence of cultures was creating something unprecedented. A new way of being together that honoured both traditions, while transcending their limitations. It was fragile, this unity, built on mutual need but sustained by growing respect. Like the first tender shoots of spring, it required careful tending, protection from the harsh winds of prejudice and fear. As stars began to appear in the darkening sky, the feast was ending, but something deeper had begun. The exchange of cultures had woven new threads into the fabric of both communities. This moment, this gathering, this choosing to see humanity in the other, would ripple forward through generations, becoming the heartbeat of gratitude, the soul of thanksgiving, the enduring hope for unity. Chapter 7. A Psalm of Unity. As twilight descended over the settlement, voices began to weave together in ancient harmony. Native chants drifted across the clearing, blending with gentle hymns sung by the colonists. The melodies seemed to rise and fall like breathing itself, creating a sacred space where two worlds could meet. In this quiet hour, cultural boundaries softened, and something beautiful began to emerge beneath the darkening sky, a symphony of shared humanity. The elder's voice carried stories older than memory, tales passed down through countless generations under these same stars. Children from both communities gathered close, their eyes wide with wonder, as words painted pictures of creation, migration, and survival. Each story was a thread in an invisible tapestry, connecting past to present, stranger to friend. The fire crackled softly between them, illuminating faces that reflected the same deep longing for connection and understanding. Sarah sat cross-legged beside running deer, her calloused hands folded in her lap as the oral histories unfolded. The Wampanoag woman's voice rose and fell like gentle waves, speaking of seasons when corn grew tall and fish ran thick in silver streams. These were not just stories, they were maps of the heart, guides to living in harmony with the land. Sarah found herself nodding, recognizing wisdom that her own grandmother might have shared on quiet evenings long ago. The peace pipe emerged from sacred wrapping, carved from red stone and adorned with feathers that whispered in the evening breeze. This was no mere ceremony, it was an invitation into something profound. The bowl held tobacco mixed with sweetgrass and sage, herbs that would carry prayers skyward. As the pipe was lit, smoke curled upward like incense, creating a bridge between earth and heaven, between two peoples seeking common ground beneath the vast canopy of stars. Chief Massasoit received the pipe with reverence, his weathered hands steady as he drew the sacred smoke deep into his lungs. He held it for a long moment, then exhaled slowly, releasing prayers for peace, for understanding, for the children who would inherit this fragile friendship. The smoke drifted across the circle, carrying with it hopes and dreams that transcended language barriers. When he passed the pipe to Governor Bradford, their eyes met in mutual respect. Bradford's hands trembled slightly as he accepted the pipe, understanding the weight of this moment. He had never participated in such a ritual, yet something deep within him recognized its sacred nature. The smoke tasted of earth and sky, of prayers whispered by generations before him. As he exhaled, he felt his own silent petition join the cloud drifting heavenward. A prayer for wisdom, for patience, for the courage to bridge the gap between two very different worlds. The pipe continued its journey around the circle, each person adding their breath, their hopes, their commitment to this fragile peace. Young Samuel's eyes grew wide as the carved stem touched his lips, the taste foreign yet somehow familiar, like coming home to a place he had never been. Squanto smiled gently, remembering his first time in such a circle. The ritual was teaching them all that peace was not just an agreement, but a sacred trust shared breath by breath. Above them, the first stars appeared, tiny pinpricks of light in the deepening purple sky. The constellations looked the same to every person in that circle. Puritan and Wampanoag alike could trace the same patterns their ancestors had followed for navigation and seasonal guidance. Under this cosmic canopy, human differences seemed smaller, more manageable. The stars had witnessed countless such gatherings throughout history, silent guardians of humanity's eternal search for connection and understanding across all boundaries. The chanting resumed, but now voices from both cultures joined in wordless harmony. They did not share the same language, yet they shared the same yearning for peace, for prosperity, for their children to grow up in a world where differences were celebrated rather than feared. The melodies wove together like autumn vines, creating something entirely new while honoring ancient traditions. In this sacred space, they were neither colonists nor native, simply human beings seeking common ground. Elizabeth found herself humming along, her voice blending naturally with the gentle chorus surrounding her. The tune was unfamiliar, yet it resonated in her bones like a half-remembered lullaby. Beside her, a young Wampanoag mother rocked her baby to the rhythm, the child's peaceful sleep, a testament to the harmony filling the clearing. This was what peace looked like, not grand treaties or formal declarations, but quiet moments where barriers dissolved into shared humanity beneath the watchful stars. As the evening deepened, the fire cast dancing shadows across faces, marked by hardship, yet softened by hope. These were people who had endured loss, displacement, uncertainty. Yet here they sat together, sharing breath and song, and the fundamental desire for their families to thrive. The peace pipe had completed its circuit, leaving behind not just smoke, but the lingering presence of something sacred, a bond that transcended the practical agreements they had forged during daylight hours. The oral histories continued into the night, stories of great journeys, of seasons of plenty and seasons of want, of ancestors who had faced challenges with courage and wisdom. Each tale carried medicine for the soul, reminding everyone present that they were part of something larger than themselves. The children listened with rapt attention, absorbing not just the words, but the deeper truth that they were inheriting a world where cooperation was possible, where different peoples could choose friendship over fear. When the last story faded into silence, the group sat in comfortable quietude, each person lost in their own reflections. The fire had burned low, its embers glowing like earthbound stars. The real stars above seemed closer now, as if the evening's ritual had lifted them all a little higher, closer to understanding, closer to the universal truths that connect all human hearts. In this peaceful moment, past grievances seemed distant, future uncertainties less daunting. Slowly, reverently, people began to rise and stretch, knowing that this sacred time was drawing to a close. Hands were clasped in farewell. Eyes met with newfound respect. Children sleepily rubbed their eyes as parents gathered them close. The peace pipe was carefully wrapped and put away, but the peace it had helped create lingered in the air like sweet smoke. They had created something precious here, a foundation of trust that would support the challenging days ahead. As the gathering dispersed, people walking quietly back to their separate worlds, the stars continued their eternal watch. What had been accomplished here was more than diplomacy, more than practical alliance. It was recognition that despite different languages, customs and beliefs, they shared the same hopes for their children, the same desire for peace, the same capacity for friendship. Under the infinite sky, they had found their common humanity and discovered that unity was not about becoming the same, but about celebrating differences while honouring shared dreams. Chapter 8. Before the dawn of winter, the great feast has ended, and now we drift into its gentle wake. The wooden tables stand empty, their surfaces still warm from shared meals and lingering conversations. Outside, the first whispers of winter stir through bare branches, carrying with them the promise of colder days ahead. Yet something beautiful lingers in this quiet space between seasons, between celebration and solitude. Early winter winds begin their slow dance through the settlement, rustling the last stubborn leaves that cling to oak and maple. The air has grown sharp, crisp enough that each breath becomes visible in small puffs of white. Children chase these ghostly clouds with delighted laughter, their voices echoing off wooden walls as parents gather cloaks and prepare for the journey home through the gathering dusk. Hands clasp in grateful farewell, rough palms meeting gentle ones as neighbours prepare to part. Words of thanks flow like warm honey in the cold air, simple phrases carrying the weight of seasons survived and bonds forged. An elder native woman presses dried herbs into a settler's palm, while he offers her a small wooden carving his son made during the long summer evenings. The exchanges continue in the amber light of early evening, baskets of late harvest vegetables changing hands alongside promises of winter visits. A young pilgrim mother wraps her baby closer, accepting a rabbit fur blanket from weathered Indigenous hands that have known many winters. These gifts carry more than warmth. They carry the unspoken hope that kindness will outlast the coming cold. Smoke rises from the last dying embers of cooking fires, grey ribbons dissolving into a pewter sky that promises snow before the weekends. The scent of roasted corn and venison still hangs in the air, mingling with the sharp bite of wood smoke and the earthy smell of leaves beginning their slow surrender to winter's patient advance through the forest. Children reluctantly gather their simple toys, corn-husk dolls and carved animals clutched in small fingers that have grown pink from the chill. They call out final promises to playmates, voices growing distant as families begin the slow migration back to their separate dwellings. The universal language of childhood friendship needs no translation, smiles and waves bridging any gap that words cannot cross. Lanterns begin to flicker to life as daylight softens into the gentle blue of approaching night, their warm glow creating pools of golden light against the deepening shadows. Feet shuffle through fallen leaves that crackle like whispered secrets, each step a reminder of the feast that brought two peoples together around tables laden with the earth's generous bounty. An elderly pilgrim man pauses at the edge of the gathering, his weathered face turned toward the darkening woods where his indigenous neighbors will soon disappear. His breath formed small clouds in the chill air as he whispers a prayer of gratitude, not just for the food that filled their bellies, but for the hands that helped harvest it and the hearts that chose to share. The first stars begin their nightly vigil overhead, pinpricks of ancient light watching over this small corner of a vast continent where two worlds have briefly touched. Below, the last conversations wind down to comfortable silence, filled with the understanding that some moments are too precious for words, too sacred for anything but quiet reverence and grateful hearts. Cloaks are drawn tighter against the growing cold as families gather their belongings, woven baskets and clay pots carefully racked against the journey home. The wind carries the distant sound of waves against the rocky shore, a constant reminder of the ocean that brought some here and the land that welcomed others long before memory began. Long shadows begin their slow stretch across the frost-touched ground, dark fingers reaching from every person as they move through the dying light. These shadows seem to dance together even when their owners stand apart, a visual reminder that some connections transcend the physical world, extending into realms of spirit and intention that no winter wind can ever break or diminish. The departing footsteps create a symphony in the fallen leaves, soft crushes and gentle rustles marking the end of this chapter in their shared story. Yet each step forward carries something backward too, memories of warm food and warmer fellowship that will sustain hearts through the lean months ahead when snow covers the ground and fires burn low in lonely cabins. Windows begin to glow like amber jewels in the gathering darkness, each one a beacon of home and hearth, where tonight's stories will be shared around family fires. Children will drift to sleep hearing tales of the great feast, their dreams filled with images of abundance and the strange magic that happens when strangers choose to become friends across all differences. The final guests disappear into the forest paths, their lantern light bobbing like fireflies among the dark trees until even those distant glows fade into memory. Behind them, the clearing settles into peaceful silence, broken only by the soft whisper of wind through bare branches and the distant call of night birds beginning their ancient songs. And so we leave this moment suspended between seasons, between one chapter and the next, where gratitude lingers like the last warmth of autumn before winter's deeper sleep. The shadows have grown long, but they point not toward ending, but toward continuation, toward the enduring ties that bind hearts together, even when bodies must part until spring returns with its promise of renewal. Chapter 9. Seasons of Change. Time moves like water through the peninsula, flowing in endless cycles of renewal and rest. Here the earth breathes with ancient rhythms, spring's tender awakening, summer's abundant growth, autumn's generous harvest, winter's peaceful slumber. The people who call this land home have learned to dance with these seasons, their lives woven into nature's grand tapestry, each turning of the wheel bringing both familiar comfort and gentle transformation. A rhythm as old as memory itself. Listen, can you hear it? The soft rustle of cornfields swaying in evening breezes, the distant chirping of cicadas singing their ancient songs. These sounds have echoed across this peninsula for countless generations, unchanged, eternal. They speak of continuity, of traditions passed down through weathered hands and whispered stories, of a people who understand that survival means moving with nature, not against her, breathing in harmony with the turning wheel of seasons, finding peace in patterns older than human memory. As winter's grip slowly loosens, the first stirrings of spring awaken the sleeping earth. Tender shoots push through thawing ground, and with them, the community awakens too. Children who spent months learning stories by firelight now venture outside, their laughter mixing with birdsong. Elders emerge from winter lodges, reading signs in cloud formations and wind directions, knowing that soon, very soon, very soon, it will be time to plant again, to trust once more in the earth's endless capacity for renewal. The planting moon rises full and bright, casting silver light across prepared fields. This is sacred time, when seeds blessed by ceremony are nestled into rich soil, when prayers are whispered over each mound, each row. The three sisters, corn, beans, squash, will grow together as they have for countless seasons, supporting each other, teaching humans about cooperation, about the wisdom of community, about trusting in the ancient partnership between earth and sky, seed and rain, patience and abundance. Women gather at dawn, their hands gentle but sure, as they place precious seeds into waiting earth. Each variety carries stories. This corn from grandmother's grandmother, these beans that survived the harsh winter 5 seasons past. The men prepare new tools from ash and oak, while children collect stones for field boundaries. Everyone has a role in this timeless ritual. This yearly promise between human hands and Mother Earth, a covenant written in soil and sealed with hope. Spring rain falls in gentle rhythms, awakening seeds, coaxing green shoots toward warming sun. The community watches with quiet satisfaction, seeing the first tender leaves unfurl. The fields become nurseries of possibility, tended with careful attention, weeded with patient hands, protected by ancient prayers and practical wisdom passed down through generations. This is how it has always been. This marriage of hope and labour, of faith and knowledge, of human care and nature's boundless generosity. Summer arrives with abundance, the three sisters growing tall and strong in their eternal dance. Cornstalks reach toward cloudless skies, while bean vines spiral upward, and squash spreads its broad leaves across the ground below. The community gathers regularly, not just to tend the plants, but to celebrate their growth, to share stories in the shade of growing corn, to teach children the old songs that help plants flourish, to maintain the sacred relationship between human hearts and growing things. Long summer evenings stretch like golden honey, filled with the music of growing things. Cicadas sing their endless chorus. Leaves rustle secrets in warm breezes. Night birds call across moonlit fields. Children chase fireflies between corn rows, their voices mixing with evening prayers of gratitude. This is the season of plenty, when the earth shows off her generosity, when every sunset brings the harvest closer, when the air itself seems to hum with contentment and the sweet promise of abundance soon to come. As summer deepens, the community expands its view beyond individual fields, looking across the broader peninsula. Smoke rises from distant villages, signal fires carrying news of good growing seasons, of successful alliances, of shared prosperity. Messengers travel well-worn paths, carrying seeds and stories, techniques and traditions. The people understand that their abundance is connected to the abundance of others, that prosperity flows like water, strongest when shared among neighbours, friends, allies across the vast and generous land. The harvest moon rises like a golden blessing, casting warm light across fields heavy with abundance. This is the season of gathering, when patient months of tending finally yield their rewards. Corn ears hang heavy on sturdy stalks, beans dangle in plump pods, squash rest like treasures on spreading vines. The community moves through fields with reverence, hands gentle as they gather what the earth has given, voices soft with gratitude, hearts full of wonder at this yearly miracle of seed becoming sustenance. Harvest time brings the community together in joyful labour, hands working side by side, young and old sharing the sacred task of gathering abundance. Children learn to select the best ears, to handle each vegetable with respect, to understand that this food will sustain them through the coming winter. Laughter mingles with ancient harvest songs, voices carrying across fields like prayers of thanksgiving. This is more than work. It is ceremony, celebration, the culmination of a year's worth of faith and partnership with the generous earth. The great feast arrives with autumn's peak, tables groaning under the weight of the harvest's bounty. Communities from across the peninsula gather, bringing their best foods, their finest stories, their most beautiful songs. This is alliance time. When friendships are renewed over shared meals. When trade agreements are made with handshakes and smiles. When children from different villages play together. Learning that abundance shared is abundance multiplied. That gratitude grows stronger when expressed in the company of friends and neighbours. But time, like a river, continues flowing, bringing change along with continuity. New faces appear at the feast tables, pale-skinned newcomers with different ways of understanding the land, of measuring abundance, of relating to the seasons. At first, these differences seem small, interesting, even beneficial. New crops, new tools, new ideas flowing into ancient patterns. The community opens its heart, sharing knowledge, welcoming strangers, not yet understanding how profoundly these meet up. Gradually, slowly, like morning mist giving way to daylight, the old patterns begin to shift. Colonial settlements spread across the peninsula, bringing new approaches to land, to ownership, to seasonal rhythms. The ancient cycle of planting and harvest continues. But within changing contexts, different languages mix at trading posts. New foods appear on feast tables. Traditional alliances adapt to include newcomers with their own customs, their own understanding of gratitude, their own ways of celebrating abundance. Change flows like water, reshaping familiar landscapes of both lands. And so the seasons continue their eternal dance. Spring, summer, autumn, winter, each carrying forward both ancient wisdom and new possibilities. The corn still rustles in evening breezes. Cicadas still sing their timeless songs. But now these sounds mingle with church bells, with different languages, with the voices of children learning new ways alongside old. The feast evolves, adapts, grows, carrying forward the essential spirit of gratitude and community, even as its forms transform. Like seasons themselves, forever changing, forever. Chapter 10. Symbiotic Strains. The morning frost clings to bare branches like crystalline tears, each breath visible in the crisp autumn air. What began as hopeful cooperation between two worlds now bears the weight of unspoken tensions. The harvest celebration feels distant, replaced by careful glances and measured words. In the settlement, smoke rises from chimneys while beyond the forest edge, watchful eyes observe every movement with growing unease and quiet apprehension. The morning council gathers beneath pewter skies, voices hushed against the bitter wind. Elder Williams spreads weathered maps across rough-hewn tables, his finger tracing boundaries that seem to shift like shadows. What were once shared hunting grounds now bear the weight of ownership, of claims staked in foreign law. The Indigenous representatives sit in respectful silence, their dark eyes reflecting centuries of wisdom and a growing wariness of promises too easily broken. Chief Standing Bear rises slowly, his weathered hands folded with quiet dignity. His words carry the weight of seasons, of treaties written in smoke and sealed with handshakes. The translator stumbles over concepts that have no English equivalent, the sacred relationship between people and land lost in translation. Around the circle, faces grow tense as misunderstanding breeds like winter shadows, each side hearing different meanings in the same carefully chosen words. Sarah watches from her kitchen window, her breath fogging the glass as she observes the tense gathering. Her husband speaks of expansion, of clearing more land for crops and livestock. But she remembers the gentle hands that taught her which berries were safe, which roots could heal fever. The memory sits heavy in her chest, a weight of gratitude tangled with growing unease, knowing that progress often demands a price that others must pay. The afternoon brings visitors to the settlement, Indigenous families carrying baskets of late-harvest corn and dried fish. Their presence once brought joy and celebration, now carries undertones of formality, of diplomacy rather than friendship. Children peer from behind their mothers, no longer running freely between the two communities. Trust, once as natural as breathing, now requires careful cultivation, tended like a fragile flame against winter winds. In the trading post, goods exchange hands with polite efficiency, rather than warm conversation. furs for tools, corn for blankets, each transaction measured and recorded in ledger books. The old woman who once shared stories while weaving baskets now counts out beads in careful silence, her granddaughter translating negotiations that once flowed in gestures and smiles. Commerce, it seems, builds different bridges than those constructed from simple human kindness and mutual respect. Evening settles over the land like a heavy quilt, bringing with it whispered conversations behind closed doors. The settlers speak of security, of protecting their families and investments. Miles away, around another fire, Indigenous elders share concerns about sacred sites, about hunting grounds that sustain their people through harsh winters. Both sides prepare for negotiations tomorrow, each hoping to preserve what they hold most dear, neither fully understanding the other's deepest fears. Young Thomas finds himself caught between two worlds, his childhood friendship with Running Wolf now complicated by adult responsibilities. They meet at the river's edge where ice begins to form, speaking in the mixture of languages that once seemed natural. Both carry messages from their respective communities, requests wrapped in diplomatic courtesy, but underneath flows the current of genuine affection. Two boys, now men, trying to bridge an ever-widening gap. The negotiations resume with morning light, voices more strained than yesterday. Legal documents spread across tables like territorial claims, written in a language that reduces sacred relationships to property lines and usage rights. Chief Standing Bear's translator struggles to explain concepts of stewardship, of land as living entity rather than commodity. The divide deepens with each carefully parsed phrase, each attempt at understanding creating new confusion, new opportunities for mistrust to take root. A moment of breakthrough arrives unexpectedly, when Elder Williams's grandson falls through thin ice. Running Wolf doesn't hesitate, plunging into freezing water to pull the boy to safety. In that instant, artificial boundaries dissolve, revealing the human hearts that beat beneath political positions. Gratitude and relief transcend language barriers, reminding everyone present of deeper connections, of shared humanity that no treaty can capture, no boundary can diminish, no misunderstanding can permanently sever. The rescue creates a pause in proceedings, a moment of grace that allows softer words to emerge. Around the warming fire, stories are shared instead of demands, memories instead of legal precedents. An elder recalls the first Thanksgiving feast, when gratitude flowed freely between communities. For precious hours, the weight of political necessity lifts, replaced by simple human connection, the kind that builds lasting peace rather than temporary treaties, understanding rather than mere compliance. Yet even as hearts warm around the fire, the larger tensions remain unresolved. Maps still show conflicting claims, resources still grow scarce, populations still expand with needs that seem impossible to balance. The momentary unity feels fragile, like early ice that cannot yet bear weight. Tomorrow will bring fresh challenges, new pressures, but tonight offers something precious, proof that beneath all the complexity, the human capacity for compassion endures, flickering but unextinguished. As delegates prepare to return to their communities, handshakes carry more weight than signatures on parchment. Progress has been incremental, measured in small gestures rather than grand agreements. Chief Standing Bear and Elder Williams exchange gifts, simple tokens that represent hope rather than legal binding. The path forward remains uncertain, fraught with challenges that test the best intentions. But the foundation of mutual respect, though strained, has not crumbled completely beneath the pressure. The frost deepens as autumn surrenders to winter's approach, mirroring the chill that settles into inter-community relations. Yet in quiet moments, when political pressures ease, glimpses of the old warmth still surface. Sarah leaves cornbread on her doorstep, finding it replaced by healing herbs. Children still wave across the river, even as their parents discuss boundaries and rights. Small acts of kindness persist, like embers banked against winter, waiting for spring winds to fan them into renewed flame. The chapter closes with snow beginning to fall, soft flakes that blur the harsh lines drawn on maps. that cover the scars of difficult negotiations with pristine silence. Both communities settle into winter routines, separated by more than distance now, yet still connected by invisible threads of shared history, shared humanity, shared hope that understanding might yet bloom when the earth awakens again. For now, rest comes to the land, and to those who call it home. Chapter 11. Origins Lost and Found. As decades passed, the simple harvest gathering began to change. Stories shifted with each telling, details blurred by time and distance. What had once been a specific moment, a particular meal shared between particular people, slowly transformed into something larger. The feast took on new meanings, carried forward by voices that had never witnessed the original tables. New traditions began layering over old ones, like sediment accumulating on a riverbed. Each generation added their own understanding, their own rituals and customs. The original Wampanoag presence, so central to that first gathering, began fading from the telling. In its place grew simpler narratives, stories that felt more comfortable, more familiar to those who claimed this history as their own inheritance. The Thanksgiving story acquired mythic proportions, growing larger than the lives that first lived it. Historical figures became archetypes, complex human beings transformed into symbols of gratitude and providence. The messy realities of survival, the delicate negotiations between cultures, the everyday struggles, all of these dissolved into golden tableau of harmony and abundance that never quite existed as imagined. What had begun as a local celebration, rooted in specific soil and specific relationships, slowly morphed into something grander. A national holiday was taking shape, though it would be generations before it carried that official weight. The feast was becoming a symbol, a way for a growing nation to understand its own beginnings, its own character, its own destiny in this vast continent. Time worked its gentle alchemy, transforming memory into tradition, tradition into institution. Each autumn brought new celebrations, each table adding its own flavour to the growing legend. Families who had never set foot in Massachusetts claimed the Pilgrims as spiritual ancestors, their gratitude echoing across centuries in countless miles of wilderness, binding strangers together through shared story and shared feast. The original meanings grew fainter, like voices calling across an ever-widening distance. Indigenous perspectives, so essential to that first gathering, became whispers beneath the louder chorus of colonial accomplishment. The complexity of cultural exchange, the delicate balance of trade and diplomacy, the reality of two worlds meeting, all of this simplified into more comfortable narratives of friendship and divine blessing. Regional variations began emerging, each community shaping the celebration to fit their own landscape and circumstances. Southern tables carried different flavours, Western settlements adapted the feast to their frontier realities. The holiday was becoming a living thing, growing and changing as America itself grew and changed, spreading like seeds carried on autumn winds to take root in new soil. By the time the Civil War arrived, the nation was fracturing along lines deeper than politics or economics. Brother fought brother, states turned against states, and the very idea of American unity hung in the balance. In this darkness, the memory of that first Thanksgiving took on new urgency, a reminder of what had been possible, of what might be possible again. Abraham Lincoln, tall and melancholy, carried the weight of a breaking nation on his shoulders. Letters arrived at the White House, citizens pleading for something to unite the country, something to remind Americans of their shared heritage. Sarah Josepha Hale, editor and advocate, had been campaigning for years, urging presidents to establish a national day of gratitude and reflection. In October of 1863, with battlefields still smoking and hospitals overflowing with wounded, Lincoln issued his proclamation. The last Thursday in November would be set aside, a day for the nation to pause, to remember its blessings even amid unprecedented sorrow, to gather around tables both full and empty, to honour the dead while nurturing hope for the living. Lincoln's words carried the weight of war, the gravity of national mourning, but also the stubborn persistence of gratitude. He invoked the Pilgrims, their courage and faith, their ability to find abundance, even in hardship. The proclamation transformed a regional custom into a national ritual, binding North and South, East and West, in a shared moment of reflection and remembrance. The tradition solidified, taking on the weight of official blessing and the power of presidential endorsement. What had once been optional became expected. What had been regional became national. What had been historical became mythological. Thanksgiving was no longer just about the Pilgrims and their harvest. It was about America itself, its character, its destiny, its ability to endure and flourish. In becoming national, the holiday gained something precious, a shared rhythm that could unite diverse communities across vast distances. Families separated by geography could know they were gathering at the same moment, sharing the same impulse toward gratitude, participating in something larger than themselves. The feast became a thread in the American tapestry, binding together the nation's scattered children. Yet something was also lost in this transformation. The intimate particularity of that first gathering, the specific faces and voices that had shared the original meal. Indigenous presence faded from the story, replaced by simpler tales of pilgrim perseverance. The complexity of cultural encounter, the delicate negotiations that had made that feast possible, dissolved into comfortable myths of inevitable friendship and divine providence. So we find ourselves, centuries later, inheritors of layers upon layers of meaning, tradition built upon tradition, story nested within story. The original feast still echoes, but faintly, like a song half remembered, its melody transformed by countless voices singing it forward through time. We gather at our own tables, carrying forward both the gifts and the forgetting, the celebration and the forgetting, the celebration and the loss. Chapter 12. Continuity and Adaptations. The autumn air carries more than falling leaves. It carries the weight of tradition, the scent of memory, and the gentle pull of gratitude that has endured for centuries. In our modern world, where parades march down city streets, where football games fill living rooms, where families gather around tables laden with abundance, we find ourselves yearning for something deeper, something truer. Around dining room tables across the nation, families pause their busy lives, children fidget in their Sunday best, grandparents share stories that bridge generations. The ritual remains, though the world has changed beyond recognition. Smartphones rest beside china plates, delivery trucks rumble past windows where candlelight once flickered. Yet the act of gathering, of sharing, of giving thanks, continues to anchor us. Morning parades wind through streets lined with eager faces. Giant balloons float above crowds wrapped in winter coats. Marching bands play familiar melodies, while families huddle together on sidewalks, sharing thermoses of hot chocolate. These modern spectacles would mystify those first pilgrims. Yet beneath the pageantry, the same spirit dwells. Communities gathering, celebrating abundance, marking the passage of seasons with ritual and reverence. Television screens glow in darkened living rooms, where the ritual of football has become as sacred as any prayer. Men doze in recliners after generous meals. Children sprawl on carpeted floors. Women move quietly between kitchen and family room, tending to both feast and fellowship. This modern tableau, so different from harvest fields and wooden tables, yet carrying the same essence, community, comfort, the luxury of leisure after labour. In quiet moments between the bustle, when the dishes are cleared and conversations fade to whispers, many find themselves longing for simpler times. Imagining tables lit only by firelight, where gratitude felt more urgent, more real, where the harvest truly meant survival, where community bonds were forged by necessity rather than convenience. This nostalgia carries wisdom, reminding us that abundance should never diminish appreciation. Store displays bloom with turkey decorations weeks before November arrives. Sales flyers promise the perfect holiday. Social media fills with carefully curated gratitude posts. The machinery of commerce churns around this day of thanks. Yet somewhere beneath the marketing messages, families still gather with genuine hearts, still pause to acknowledge blessings, still pause to acknowledge blessings, still find ways to honor the deeper meaning that commerce cannot touch. In church halls and community centers, volunteers ladle soup into paper bowls, serving those who might otherwise feast alone. These modern pilgrims understand what their ancestors knew, that gratitude grows when shared, that abundance means nothing without generosity. Here, in humble service, the spirit of that first harvest meal lives on, stranger feeding stranger, community embracing all who hunger for food, for fellowship, for belonging. Around kitchen islands and dining tables, families attempt to recreate grandmother's recipes, measuring ingredients with imprecise hands, sharing stories of meals past. Children learn that the stuffing must be made just so, that the cranberry sauce cannot come from a can. These culinary traditions become threads, weaving past to present, connecting us to generations who stirred the same pots, seasoned with the same pots, seasoned with the same pots, seasoned with the same love. Before the meal begins, hands join around tables large and small. Heads bow in prayers, both formal and improvised. Some recite ancient blessings, others speak from hearts full of the year's joys and sorrows. Children wiggle impatiently, yet absorb the solemnity, learning that before we feast, we acknowledge, we remember, we give thanks. This pause, this breath, this breath, this breath, this breath, this breath, this moment of reverence, bridges centuries of gratitude. The teenagers at the kids' table share different concerns than their colonial counterparts, yet their laughter carries the same music, their appetites the same urgency, their presence the same gift. Across generations gathered in one room, time collapses. The great-grandmother who remembers harder times, the toddler experiencing first tastes, the parents juggling tradition and innovation, all part of an endless chain of celebration, adaptation, continuity. In apartments where space is precious, families create abundance through intention rather than excess. A small table becomes sacred through gathering. Store-bought pie tastes like love when shared with grateful hearts. Urban pilgrims understand what their rural ancestors knew, that Thanksgiving requires no cathedral, no mansion, no perfect setting, only willing hearts, open hands, and the courage to pause amidst life's chaos, to acknowledge blessing. The after-dinner quiet settles like snow. Dishes wait patiently in sinks. Children nap across sofas and spare beds. Adults linger over coffee and conversation. These moments, unhurried and unstructured, mirror the satisfaction of harvest workers resting after long labor. The reward is not in the feast alone, but in the fellowship, the freedom to simply be together, grateful, content. As evening deepens and families prepare to part, hugs linger longer than usual. Leftover containers are packed with care. Plans are made for Christmas, for birthdays, for the next gathering. The modern pilgrims understand what their ancestors discovered, that community requires tending, that gratitude grows through practice, that the table, whether rough-hewn wood or polished oak, remains humanity's most sacred altar, In nursing homes and military bases, in shelters and hospitals, wherever people cannot gather at family tables, volunteers and strangers become temporary family, proving that the spirit of Thanksgiving cannot be confined, cannot be limited, cannot be diminished by circumstance. The essence transcends location, transcends blood relations, transcends comfort, residing in the simple human need to acknowledge, to share, to give thanks. And so the tradition continues, adapted but unbroken, evolved but essential. Like a river that changes course while flowing toward the same sea, Thanksgiving moves through time, carrying forward the wisdom of that first harvest feast. The understanding that gratitude shared multiplies, that community sustains, that in giving thanks, we discover not just what we have, but who we are. Blessed, connected, human. Chapter 13. Silent Celebrations. In living rooms across America tonight, quiet rituals unfold without fanfare or spectacle. These are the tender moments that newspapers never capture, the whispered prayers that echo only in private spaces. While parades march down busy streets and families gather around crowded tables, some of the most profound gratitude happens in solitude, in the gentle spaces between heartbeats, where memory meets the present moment. In a modest apartment overlooking the harbour, an elderly veteran named Thomas sits by his window. His weathered hands cradle a glass of amber whiskey, the same brand he shared with his unit decades ago. The ice cubes clink softly as he raises the glass toward an old photograph on the mantel. 5 young faces smile back at him, frozen in time before the world changed everything they thought they knew. To Jimmy, who never made it past 19, Thomas whispers their names into the quiet evening air. To Rodriguez, who dreamed of teaching school back home. To Sam, who carried pictures of his newborn daughter he would never hold. The toast is simple, unhurried, each name spoken like a prayer. Outside, seagulls call across the water, carrying his words towards some distant shore where his brothers might still hear them. The whiskey burns gently as Thomas remembers their last Thanksgiving together, huddled in a foxhole sharing a can of cranberry sauce. They had laughed then, young and invincible, believing they would all return to tell the story. Now he tells it alone, to the photograph, to the harbour, to the gathering darkness that holds their memory like a sacred trust that time cannot break or diminish. Across the city, in a small kitchen painted soft yellow, Maria closes her eyes and breathes deeply. The scent of her grandmother's recipe fills the air, turkey seasoned with cumin and oregano, flavours that bridge 2 worlds. Her children sleep peacefully in the next room, their homework finished, their bellies full. This quiet moment is hers alone, stolen from the endless demands of single motherhood, precious as gold. She thinks of the long hospital stays last winter, when pneumonia nearly claimed her youngest son. The bills still arrive monthly, but tonight they feel manageable. Her hands, once trembling with worry, now steady as she washes the last dish. The warm water runs over her fingers like a blessing, reminding her that some gifts cannot be measured, cannot be bought, only received with an open heart, only received with an open heart. Maria whispers her gratitude to the kitchen walls, to the flickering candle on the windowsill, to the photograph of her grandmother watching from the refrigerator door. For health restored, for children who laugh again, for the strength to carry on when the world felt too heavy. These words need no audience, no witness, only the honest acknowledgement of grace, only the honest acknowledgement of grace received when hope seemed impossible to find. In the mountains, where ancient pine trees guard the entrance to the reservation, Joseph stands at his grandfather's grave. The wind carries the scent of sage and wood smoke from the ceremonial fires below. His weathered hands hold tobacco, sacred and sweet, an offering to the spirits who walked this land long before pilgrims ever dreamed of distant shores. This is Thanksgiving, as his people have always known it, older than any harvest feast. The tobacco falls like snow onto the earth above his grandfather's resting place, each grain a prayer, each prayer a bridge between worlds. Joseph speaks in the language of his ancestors, words that carry the weight of generations, thanking the deer who gave their lives, the corn that grew despite the drought, the grandmother moon who guided them through another season of survival and remembrance. He tells his grandfather about the new baby, born last month with eyes like midnight and hands that already reach toward the singing birds. About the treaty negotiations, slow but steady, like water wearing away stone. About the young ones learning the old songs, carrying forward what was nearly lost. The wind carries his words toward the 4 directions, toward ancestors who nod their approval from beyond the veil. In a duplex apartment, fragrant with cardamom and cinnamon, the Patel family gathers around their small dining table. American turkey sits beside Indian dal, cranberry sauce shares space with homemade chutney. 3 generations navigate between languages, between the customs they carried across oceans and the traditions they are slowly claiming as their own, weaving something beautiful and entirely unique. Grandmother Patel closes her eyes as her son leads them in prayer, words of gratitude spoken in accented English, peppered with Hindi phrases that hold deeper meaning. They thank America for its shelter, India for its roots, the long journey that brought them to this moment. The children fidget slightly, but their hearts absorb the lesson of belonging to multiple worlds without losing themselves. Little Priya asks why they celebrate Thanksgiving when it is not their holiday, and her grandfather explains that gratitude needs no passport, that thankfulness speaks every language. They are writing their own chapter in the great American story. One shared meal at a time, one generation teaching the next how to honor both the journey taken and the ground beneath their feet. As evening deepens across the continent, these quiet celebrations weave together like threads in an invisible tapestry. No cameras capture these moments, no social media posts preserve these prayers. Yet they form the true heart of Thanksgiving, the recognition that some of our deepest gratitude lives in silence, in the spaces between words, where the soul speaks directly to the infinite. Tomorrow, the world will return to its noise and hurry, but tonight these gentle souls have touched something eternal. In their solitude, they have found communion. In their remembrance, they have discovered presence. In their gratitude, they have transformed ordinary moments into sacred ground, proving that the most profound celebrations often happen when no one else is watching, when only the heart bears witness. Chapter 14. Remembrances and Respects. Today, we turn our attention to a different story, one of resilience and remembrance. While many gather to give thanks, others pause to honour what was lost. Indigenous communities across the land have chosen to commemorate this day, not with celebration, but with solemn reflection. Their voices carry the weight of history, speaking truths that demand our quiet attention and understanding. In Plymouth, where the first Thanksgiving is said to have taken place, another tradition unfolds each fourth Thursday. The National Day of Mourning began in 1970, when Indigenous activists chose to speak their truth. They gathered not to feast, but to fast, not to celebrate, but to remember those who could no longer speak for themselves. Their presence became a powerful counter-narrative to the dominant story. The Wampanoag people, whose ancestors once shared that historic meal, now stand as guardians of memory. They remember how their lands were taken, how their people were displaced, how their culture was nearly extinguished. Yet here they remain, unbowed and unbroken. Their survival itself is an act of resistance, a testament to the enduring strength of Indigenous peoples across this continent. Each year, as families gather around laden tables, another gathering takes place on Coles Hill. Indigenous people and their allies come together, not to deny the past, but to honour it completely. They speak the names of those who died from disease and violence, whose stories were erased from the comfortable narrative of peaceful cooperation and mutual benefit. The ceremonies are quiet, dignified, filled with the weight of centuries. Drums beat in slow rhythm, carrying prayers for ancestors and hopes for descendants. Sage smoke rises into the autumn air, cleansing and blessing this sacred act of remembrance. These rituals connect past and present, ensuring that history's full truth remains alive in the hearts of the living. Children learn different lessons here, not of pilgrims and Indians sharing harvest bounty, but of complex relationships between peoples. They discover how survival sometimes meant collaboration, but how colonization ultimately brought devastating loss. These young ones carry forward both grief and hope, understanding that healing begins with acknowledging what really happened in these lands centuries ago. The National Day of Mourning is not about anger, though anger would be justified. It is about truth-telling in its most sacred form. Indigenous speakers share stories passed down through generations, tales that never made it into textbooks. They speak of resilience forged in fire, of cultures that refuse to disappear despite overwhelming odds against their survival. As turkey aromas drift through neighbourhoods, As football games flicker on screens, another kind of gathering continues. Here, gratitude takes a different form. Gratitude for ancestors who endured the unendurable, for elders who kept languages alive in secret, for young people who carry traditions forward into an uncertain but hopeful future filled with possibility. The contrast is profound between celebration and commemoration, between thanksgiving and mourning. Yet both responses to this day hold their own validity, their own necessary truths. Indigenous communities have chosen to transform this day into something meaningful for their own healing, creating space for grief that has too long been silenced by comfortable myths. Listen carefully to the wind that November day, and you might hear the voices of those who came before. Voices that speak of love for this land, of connections to earth and water that colonizers could never understand. These voices remind us that Indigenous peoples were not simply part of American prehistory, but remain vital presences in our shared contemporary landscape. The mourning is not just for those who died, but for languages lost, for sacred sites desecrated, for children taken from their families and forced into boarding schools designed to kill the Indian and save the man. Each loss is honoured, each stolen piece of culture acknowledged. This comprehensive remembrance becomes an act of restoration and reclamation. Yet within this mourning, hope persists like wildflowers growing through concrete. Indigenous communities have survived attempted genocide, cultural suppression, and centuries of marginalization. Their mere existence is miraculous. Their continued cultural practices are acts of defiance. The National Day of Mourning celebrates this survival as much as it grieves what was lost along the way. Modern Indigenous activists use this day to educate, to build bridges, to invite others into deeper understanding. They do not ask for pity, but for recognition. They do not seek to diminish others' celebrations, but to expand the narrative to include all voices. Their patient teaching becomes a gift to a nation still learning its own history. As evening falls on this complex day, two different observances wind toward their close. In dining rooms, families share what they are grateful for. On Coles Hill, participants carry forward renewed commitment to justice and truth. Both gatherings honour something sacred, though they define that sacredness in fundamentally different ways that reflect their distinct historical experiences. Perhaps this is the deeper lesson of Thanksgiving, that gratitude can coexist with grief, that celebration can acknowledge loss, that a mature nation can hold multiple truths simultaneously. The National Day of Mourning does not diminish Thanksgiving, it completes it. It reminds us that true gratitude requires us to see clearly, to remember fully, and to honour completely. Chapter 15. Closing Gratitude. As our journey through time draws to a gentle close, we find ourselves returning to where it all began, that autumn day in 1621, when two worlds came together in shared gratitude. The essence of that first gathering still whispers to us across the centuries, reminding us that beneath all our differences lies a simple truth. We are all seeking connection, warmth, and understanding in this vast and sometimes lonely world. The wooden tables may have been replaced by modern dining rooms, the hand-sewn clothing exchanged for contemporary attire, yet the heart of Thanksgiving remains unchanged. It beats with the same rhythm of gratitude that moved those early settlers and Wampanoag people to share their harvest, to open their hands, their hearts, their hopes. In every family gathering today, in every shared meal, we echo their ancient song of thankfulness. Think of the courage it took for strangers to become friends, for fear to transform into trust. The Pilgrims, weathered by their first harsh winter, could have remained isolated, suspicious. Instead, they chose vulnerability. They accepted the outstretched hand of Massasoit and his people. This choice, this brave decision to bridge differences, created something beautiful, something that still nourishes us today, teaching us that connection is always possible. The Wampanoag brought more than corn and beans to that first feast. They brought wisdom, knowledge of the land, stories passed down through generations. Their generosity extended beyond food. It encompassed the gift of belonging, of helping newcomers find their place in an unfamiliar world. This spirit of welcome, of making room at the table for others, remains the truest expression of Thanksgiving, inviting us all to practice radical hospitality. Imagine the conversations that must have unfolded, the tentative smiles, the gentle laughter bridging language barriers, children from both communities playing together, their joy transcending cultural differences, mothers sharing universal worries about their little ones, men discovering common ground in their hopes for abundant harvests. These human moments, simple yet profound, remind us that our similarities far outweigh our differences. The recipes have evolved. Turkey preparations become more elaborate, side dishes multiplied, yet the essential ingredient remains the same: gratitude. It seasons every dish, sweetens every conversation, brings warmth to every gathering. When we pause before our meal, whether in formal prayer or quiet reflection, we join that ancient circle, adding our voices to a chorus that has been singing for 4 centuries, harmonizing across time in appreciation for life's blessings. In our modern world, where differences often divide us, where news cycles amplify conflict, Thanksgiving offers a different way. It reminds us that unity is not uniformity, that we can celebrate our diverse backgrounds while sharing common hopes. The first feast proved this. Indigenous traditions merged with Puritan customs, creating something new, something richer. This fusion of cultures, this beautiful blending, shows us how diversity strengthens rather than weakens community. The autumn leaves that witnessed that first celebration have long since returned to earth, nourishing new growth, new seasons, new possibilities. Yet their spirit lives on in every golden November afternoon, every family recipe passed down through generations, every story told around dinner tables. These traditions, like the leaves, fall and rise again, carrying forward the wisdom of gratitude, reminding each new generation of what truly matters in life. As we gather in our own homes, surrounded by loved ones, or perhaps creating new traditions, we become part of this ongoing story. We are the latest chapter in a tale that began with 2 communities, choosing connection over separation, hope over fear. Our Thanksgiving tables, whether grand or humble, echo with the same message, that abundance is not measured in possessions, but in presence, in the gift of being together. The prayers offered that day, whether spoken in English, Wampanoag, or the universal language of the heart, rise still on November winds. They carry our gratitude skyward, our appreciation for harvest and home, for second chances and new beginnings. Each blessing we count, each moment we pause to appreciate, adds to this ancient offering, creating a tapestry of thankfulness that spans centuries, connecting us to all who have celebrated before. The children who played at the edges of that first feast, their laughter mixing with adult conversation, grew up to tell their own children about the day. Strangers became neighbors. These stories, passed from parent to child, from grandparent to grandchild, carry more than historical facts. They carry more than historical facts. They carry hope, the belief that differences can be bridged, that understanding is possible, that love is stronger than fear. These lessons, gentle as bedtime stories, shape hearts across generations. In quiet moments, when the dishes are cleared, the guests have departed, we might feel it. That same sense of fullness that settled over Plymouth in 1621. Not just the satisfaction of a good meal, but the deeper contentment that comes from connection, from gratitude, from the simple joy of sharing life with others. This feeling, warm and peaceful, is Thanksgiving's greatest gift, a reminder that we are not alone. The stars that shone on that first Thanksgiving night still light our sky, connecting us across time and space to that moment of harmony. They witnessed something beautiful, a choice to build bridges rather than walls, to see possibility rather than problems. As we look up at those same constellations, we can almost hear the whispers of gratitude, the gentle sighs of contentment, the peaceful breathing of a community at rest. And so our story comes full circle, returning to the heart of what Thanksgiving truly means. Not perfection, but presence. Not abundance, but appreciation. Not uniformity, but unity in our shared humanity. The first feast was not an ending, but a beginning. An invitation extended across centuries to all who would choose gratitude over grievance. Connection over separation, love over fear. Connection over separation, love over fear. This invitation, gentle and persistent, as you settle into sleep tonight, let the spirit of that first Thanksgiving embrace you. Feel the warmth of community, the comfort of belonging, the peace that comes from a grateful heart. In your dreams, may you find yourself at that ancient table, welcomed, accepted, loved. And when morning comes, may you carry that feeling forward, becoming a bridge builder yourself, extending the feast, sharing the blessing, keeping the gentle flame of Thanksgiving burning bright in your heart and in our world.